What is this supposed to be? You print this off the internet? Sir, that's my military ID. I'm on active duty. Get down now! Resisting!
At 7:42 a.m. inside Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, two white police officers violently pinned a black man in a U.S. Air Force flight suit face down onto the concourse floor near Gate C-17. The man was Lieutenant Colonel Desmond Thorne, an active-duty combat pilot with more than 17 years of service and over 2,800 flight hours in combat zones. The officers who put their hands on him, Brett Culver and his partner Ryan Decker, had already decided based on his skin color and their own bias that he didn't fit the image of a real Air Force officer. One of them would later be heard on body cam saying, "Flight suit looks too new. Guys like him fake stuff all the time." 22 minutes later, phones inside the Pentagon were ringing. Air Force Office of Special Investigations was being alerted. And a chain of command was about to collapse under the weight of what those two officers had done on a public terminal floor in front of horrified passengers. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because the next story is one you don't want to miss. Officer Brett Culver was 42 years old and had been with the DFW Airport Police Department for almost 11 years. He was known among some co-workers as by-the-book aggressive, a label that in his case meant quick assumptions, minimal patience, and a disciplinary file with 3 formal complaints for racial profiling that had been quietly settled or dismissed. Passengers had accused him of singling out travelers of color for secondary screening and confrontational questioning. A few younger officers had requested shift changes after working alongside him, saying he was too quick to assume guilt and too slow to verify facts. That morning, Culver stood near the TSA checkpoint exit in a pressed uniform, energy drink in one hand, radio clipped to his chest, watching the early morning flow of travelers. Business executives, families with strollers, flight crews rolling luggage, and a handful of military personnel in transit. His partner, Officer Ryan Decker, 36, 4 years on the job, stayed a step behind him. Decker rarely pushed back on Culver's calls. He nodded at the same assessments, backed the same stops, and followed Culver's lead without hesitation. Culver's eyes locked on one traveler in particular. Lieutenant Colonel Desmond Thorne, 43, walked through the terminal in a standard-issue olive-drab flight suit, helmet bag slung over one shoulder, black roller bag in his right hand. His stride was purposeful, his bearing unmistakably military. The patches on his chest showed squadron insignia and a name tape with THONE embroidered in block letters. He had spent the last 17 years flying combat missions, instructing at weapons school, and rotating through classified assignments. He was on official orders, heading to Washington, D.C., to brief a Senate subcommittee on unmanned aerial vehicle protocols. He had remained in his flight suit because he was moving directly from one duty station to another with no time to change. As Thorne approached the gate area, Culver shifted his weight forward. "Hey, you in the flight suit, stop right there." Thorne stopped, turned, and faced him calmly. "Yes, officer." Culver's eyes scanned the flight suit, the patches, the name tape, the zippers. "That's your bag." "Yes, sir." "Put it down." Thorne set his roller bag down slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and visible. His hands remained at his sides. Around him, the terminal continued its morning rhythm, announcements echoing overhead, gate agents checking boarding passes, the smell of airport coffee mixing with jet fuel from the tarmac beyond the windows. Culver stepped closer, his boots squeaking on the polished floor. "Where are you coming from?" "Randolph Air Force Base, sir, San Antonio." "Uh-huh," Culver's eyes narrowed. "And where are you headed?" "Washington, D.C. I have orders for a congressional briefing." Decker had moved to Thorne's left side now, positioning himself at an angle. Thorne noticed, but didn't move his head. He kept his eyes on Culver. "Congressional briefing," Culver repeated, his tone flat, almost mocking. "In a flight suit." "Yes, sir. I'm traveling on official orders between duty stations." "Let me see some ID." Thorne reached slowly into the left chest pocket of his flight suit and pulled out his common access card, his military ID, and a folded set of travel orders. He extended both toward Culver with steady hands. Culver took them, but barely glanced at the CAC. He unfolded the orders, scanned them for maybe 3 seconds, then looked back at Thorne's face. "This looks printed off a home computer." "Sir, those are official orders signed by my commanding officer. The CAC is a Department of Defense issued." "I know what a CAC is," Culver cut him off. "I also know guys fake these all the time." A woman pulling a suitcase slowed as she passed, her eyes moving from Culver to Thorne and back. She kept walking, but looked over her shoulder twice. Thorne's jaw tightened, but his voice remained even. "Officer, if you'd like to verify my identity, I can provide you with the direct line to my commanding officer at—" "Step over here," Culver said, gesturing toward the wall near the window. Thorne didn't move immediately. "Sir, I'm happy to cooperate, but I need to make my flight. If there's a question about my credentials, I can." "I said step over here." Culver's hand moved to his belt, resting near his radio. "Now." Thorne exhaled slowly and moved toward the wall. Decker followed, staying close, too close. Thorne could feel the heat of another body just behind his left shoulder. "Put your hands on the wall," Culver said. "Officer, I don't understand what—" "Hands on the wall." Thorne placed both palms flat against the glass. Outside, a 737 was pushing back from a gate. Inside, more passengers were slowing down, staring. A gate agent at C-19 picked up her phone. Culver stepped behind him. "You carrying anything on you? Weapons? Knives?" "No, sir." "You sure about that?" "Yes, sir." Culver's hands moved to Thorne's sides, patting down the flight suit in rough, jerking motions. Thorne kept his eyes on the tarmac, his breathing controlled. He had been in worse situations. He had been shot at over Kandahar. He had pulled a teammate out of a burning helicopter in Iraq. He could handle this. But this felt different. This felt like being erased. "This uniform looks brand new," Culver said, his voice just behind Thorne's ear, like it just came out of a bag. "It's a standard-issue Nomex flight suit, sir. It's—" "I've seen plenty of military guys come through here," Culver interrupted. "They don't dress like this. They wear civvies, jeans, t-shirts." "Sir, I'm on official travel orders. I'm required to—" "Turn around." Thorne turned slowly. Culver was standing less than 2 feet away, arms crossed. Decker had moved closer, now standing directly to Thorne's left, blocking any path back toward the gate. "You got a phone on you?" Culver asked. "Yes, sir." "Take it out, unlock it." Thorne hesitated. "Sir, I don't believe you have the authority to." "Take it out," Culver said, his voice rising, "or I'm going to assume you're hiding something." A businessman in a suit stopped mid-stride, phone halfway to his ear. A mother pulled her daughter closer, whispering something. A flight attendant in a blue uniform slowed near the gate podium, her eyes locked on the scene unfolding near the window. Thorne reached into his lower leg pocket and pulled out his phone. He unlocked it and handed it to Culver. Culver swiped through the home screen, opened the Messages app, scrolled. He wasn't looking for anything specific. He was performing control. "Who's this?" Culver held up the phone, showing a text thread. "My wife, sir." "And this?" "My commanding officer." Culver kept scrolling. Thorne's hands remained at his sides, but his fingers had curled into fists. Not tightly, just enough to ground himself. "Sir," Thorne said, his voice still calm but edged with something harder now, "I've provided you with my military ID, my travel orders, and my phone. I've answered every question. I need to board my flight. If you have a legitimate concern about my identity, I can provide you with contact information for my chain of command. But I have done nothing wrong." Culver handed the phone back. For a moment, Thorne thought it was over. Then Culver looked at Decker and said, "Cuff him." Thorne's eyes widened. "What?" "You're being detained for suspected impersonation of a military officer." "Sir, I am not." Decker grabbed Thorne's left wrist and yanked it behind his back. Thorne didn't resist, but his body stiffened. "Officer, I am complying. There is no need for." Culver moved in fast, his hand driving into Thorne's shoulder, shoving him forward. "Get down, now." "I am not resisting." Thorne's voice was louder now, but still controlled. "I am a lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force, and I am." Decker hooked Thorne's right arm and twisted. Thorne's balance shifted, his knees buckled, and then Culver's hand was on the back of his neck, driving him downward. Thorne's cheekbone hit the terminal floor with a sound that echoed like a gunshot. A woman screamed. A child started crying. Thorne's CAC skittered across the tile, spinning twice before stopping near a trash can. His travel orders fluttered to the ground beside him. His helmet bag toppled over, spilling a checklist, a headset, and a folded American flag his daughter had given him before his last deployment. "Stop resisting," Decker shouted, even though Thorne's hands were visible, palms up, unmoving. "I'm not." Thorne's voice was strained, his face pressed against the cold floor. "I'm not resisting." Culver's knee was on Thorne's back now. Decker was pulling Thorne's arms behind him, the cuffs clicking into place, the sound of metal on metal, the sound of a man being reduced. The flight attendant near gate C-19 had her phone to her ear now. "Yes, I need to report an assault. DFW Airport, Concourse C, near gate 17. Two officers they just slammed a man to the ground. He's in a military uniform. He wasn't fighting. Yes, I'll stay on the line." A teenager near the Starbucks had her phone out, filming. Her hands were shaking, but she kept the camera steady. She whispered into the screen, oh my God, they just." Thorne's breath came in short bursts. His cheek was pressed against the floor, his vision blurred. He could taste blood. But he didn't move. He didn't shout. He spoke. "My name is Lieutenant Colonel Desmond Thorne, service number 87429161. I am an active duty officer in the United States Air Force. I am not resisting, I am complying." Decker leaned down close to Thorne's ear. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but the body cam on his chest caught every word. "Sure you are, buddy. Another one trying to play dress-up." 6 months earlier, Officer Brett Culver had sat across from Captain Jerome Hastings, the internal affairs investigator for the DFW Airport Police Department. The office was small, windowless, and smelled like stale coffee and old carpet. Hastings had a folder open in front of him. Inside were 3 complaints filed against Culver over the past 4 years. "Mr. Culver," Hastings had said, his tone neutral, professional, "we've received another formal complaint. This one involves a passenger, African-American male, age 34, traveling with his family. He says you singled him out for additional screening, questioned him about where he got the money for his ticket, and suggested his identification looked suspicious." Culver had leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "I was doing my job. The man is a college professor. He had a valid driver's license, a boarding pass, and TSA pre-check. And I used my discretion to conduct a secondary review." "Based on what?" Culver had shrugged. "Instinct." Hastings had closed the folder slowly. "Brett, this is the 3rd complaint in 2 years. The pattern is clear. Every single complaint involves a person of color, every single one." "That's not on me," Culver had said. "That's on them for not having their stuff together." Hastings had stared at him for a long moment. Then he'd said, "I'm recommending additional training, bias awareness, de-escalation techniques." Culver had stood up. "Is that it?" "For now." Culver had walked out without another word. He'd completed the training, he'd signed the forms, he'd sat through the videos, and then he'd gone right back to doing things his way. Because in his mind, he wasn't the problem. They were. On the terminal floor, Thorne's wrists ached from the cuffs, his cheek throbbed, but his mind was clear. "Officer," he said, his voice steady despite the pressure on his back, "I am requesting that you contact my commanding officer. His name is Colonel Patrick Reeves. He can verify my identity in under 2 minutes. Culver didn't respond. He was standing now, one boot still near Thorne's shoulder, talking into his radio. Yeah, we've got a 10:15 at gate C-17. Suspected impersonation. Subject is secured. The dispatcher's voice crackled back. Copy, do you need backup? Negative, we are good. Thorne turned his head slightly, just enough to see Decker standing over him. Officer Decker, I am not resisting. I am complying with your commands, but I am also informing you that I am a commissioned officer in the United States Air Force, and this detention is unlawful. Decker smirked. Yeah, well, unlawful or not, you're staying right there until we figure out who you really are. A man in a gray business suit approached cautiously. Excuse me, officers, I think there's been a mistake. I saw the whole thing. This man wasn't. Step back, sir, Culver said sharply. This doesn't concern you. But he wasn't doing anything. Step back. The man hesitated, then moved away, pulling out his phone. Thorne took a slow breath. Officer Culver, my CAC is a federally issued identification card. It has a chip. It can be verified in real time through the Defense Enrollment Eligibility Reporting System if you scan it. Anyone can fake a card, Culver said. Sir, these are official travel orders with a digital signature. Anyone can print those. Then call my commanding officer. I don't take orders from you. Thorne closed his eyes. He had been in worse situations, but none of them had felt like this. In combat, the enemy was clear. Here, the enemy wore a badge. A gate agent from C-19 approached, her voice shaking. Officers, I called TSA. They're sending someone over, and I think you should know that several passengers are filming this. Culver looked up sharply. His eyes scanned the crowd. At least a dozen people had phones out. The teenager by Starbucks was still recording. The flight attendant was still on the phone. The businessman in the gray suit was typing furiously. Tell them to put the phones away, Culver said. I can't do that, sir. This is a public space. Culver's jaw tightened. He looked at Decker. Get him up. We're moving him to the office. Decker grabbed Thorne's arm and pulled him to his feet. Thorne stood, his hands still cuffed behind his back, his flight suit wrinkled and scuffed from the floor. A thin line of blood ran from his lip to his chin. Officer, Thorne said quietly, you are making a serious mistake. Yeah, Culver stepped closer, his face inches from Thorne's. Well, if you're really who you say you are, then you've got nothing to worry about. Thorne looked him in the eye. You're going to regret this. Culver laughed. It was a short, bitter sound. I doubt that. They walked Thorne toward the back hallway, away from the gates, away from the crowd. But the phones kept recording. The flight attendant kept talking. And somewhere, deep in the network of federal systems that connected every military installation in the country, an alert had already been triggered. Because Thorne's CAC had been scanned at TSA 30 minutes earlier. And when an officer with an active top-secret clearance scheduled for a congressional briefing doesn't check in at his destination within a certain window, people notice. People with stars on their shoulders. They shoved Thorne into a small holding room off the main corridor. The room had a metal table, 2 chairs, and a camera in the corner. Decker pushed him into one of the chairs. The cuffs were still on. Sit tight, Decker said. We're gonna run your prints, see who you really are. Thorne didn't respond. He sat perfectly still, his back straight, his eyes forward. His training had prepared him for interrogation, for stress positions, for psychological pressure. This was just another test. Culver leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching him. You know what I think? I think you bought that flight suit online. I think you printed those orders on your home computer. And I think you're about to find out what happens when you disrespect the uniform. Thorne's eyes shifted to meet Culver's. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. I have worn this uniform for 17 years. I have flown combat missions in 3 theaters. I have lost friends in the line of duty, and you have no idea what you've just done. Big talk for a guy in handcuffs. Thorne didn't blink. Those body cameras you're wearing, they're recording everything, every word, every action. And when this is over, every second of this footage will be reviewed by people you don't want to meet. Decker laughed. You threatening us? No, I'm informing you. A knock at the door. A young officer poked his head in. Hey, Culver, TSA's here. They want to talk to you. Culver frowned. About what? I don't know. They just said it's urgent. Culver pushed off the wall and walked out. Decker stayed behind, leaning against the table, staring at Thorne. So, Decker said, how much did that flight suit cost you? Couple $100. Thorne didn't answer. You know what's funny? Decker continued. Guys like you always think you can fake it, put on a uniform, act the part, but you don't talk like a real officer. You don't carry yourself like one. Thorne's eyes stayed forward. I have nothing to say to you. Yeah, that's what I thought. Outside, voices were rising. Culver's voice. Another voice, sharper, more authoritative. Then footsteps, fast footsteps. The door opened. A man in a dark suit stepped in. He had a badge clipped to his belt. TSA Federal Air Marshal. Uncuff him, the marshal said. Decker straightened. What? I said uncuff him, now. This guy is under detention for. I know what he's under detention for, and I'm telling you to uncuff him immediately. Decker hesitated. I need to check with. Officer Decker, I am a federal agent, and I am ordering you to remove those cuffs. Do it now, or I will have you removed from this room. Decker's face flushed. He pulled out his keys and unlocked the cuffs. Thorne's hands came free. He rubbed his wrists slowly, his expression unchanged. The marshal looked at Thorne. Lieutenant Colonel Thorne, are you injured? I'll be fine. Do you need medical attention? No, sir. The marshal nodded, then he turned to Decker. Get out. Decker left. The marshal closed the door behind him and turned back to Thorne. Sir, I apologize for what just happened. I've been on the phone with TSA headquarters and Randolph AFB. Your commanding officer has been notified. And he paused. Sir, you should know that this incident has already been escalated to the Pentagon. Thorne's expression didn't change. How long ago? 8 minutes. Thorne closed his eyes. He knew what that meant. 8 minutes was enough time for a phone call to reach the Secretary of the Air Force. Enough time for an alert to hit the desk of a 3-star general. Enough time for this to become something much bigger than 2 officers and a bad decision. Outside, a phone was ringing, then another, then another. At 9:17 a.m., a black SUV pulled up to the curb outside the DFW Airport Police Headquarters. The rear door opened, and Major General Claudia Vance stepped out. She was 52 years old, 5'9", and wearing her full Air Force dress blues with 3 stars on each shoulder. Her face was composed, but her eyes were hard. She had been in a meeting at Randolph Air Force Base when the call came in. She had walked out mid-sentence, boarded a plane, and flown directly to Dallas. Behind her, 2 agents from the Air Force Office of Special Investigations exited the vehicle, along with a JAG attorney carrying a leather briefcase. They walked into the building without knocking. The desk sergeant looked up startled. Ma'am, can I help you? I'm here to see Chief Daniels, Vance said. Her voice was calm, measured, and absolutely unyielding. Do you have an appointment? No. I can call his office and... You can walk me to his office now, or I can walk there myself. Your choice. The sergeant stood. This way, ma'am. They walked down a narrow hallway. Framed photos of officers lined the walls. Commendations, awards. The sergeant knocked on a door marked Chief of Police. Come in, a voice called. The sergeant opened the door. Chief, there's a... Vance walked past him into the office. Chief Raymond Daniels looked up from his desk. He was a thick-shouldered man in his late 50s with gray hair and a permanent scowl. He started to speak, then stopped when he saw the stars on Vance's shoulders. He stood. General, can I help you? Vance didn't sit. Two of your officers assaulted one of my pilots this morning, Lieutenant Colonel Desmond Thorne. He was traveling on official orders to brief a Senate subcommittee, and your officers detained him, ignored his credentials, and slammed him face first onto a terminal floor in front of civilian witnesses. Daniel's face paled. I wasn't aware. You are now. Vance placed a folder on his desk. That's a copy of Lieutenant Colonel Thorne's service record, 17 years, 3 Bronze Stars, a Distinguished Flying Cross, over 2,800 combat flight hours. He was detained for suspected impersonation. She paused. Would you like to explain to me how that happened? Daniels opened the folder. His hands were shaking slightly. General, I assure you if there was a mistake. There was no mistake, Vance said. There was racial profiling, there was excessive force, and there was a complete failure of judgment. One of the AFOSI agents stepped forward. Chief Daniels, we're going to need access to all body cam footage, CCTV footage, and incident reports related to this detention. We're also going to need the personnel files for officers Brett Culver and Ryan Decker. Daniels looked from Vance to the agent. Yes, of course, I'll have my staff pull everything. Now, Vance said. Yes, ma'am, right now. Daniels picked up his phone and made the call. While he spoke, Vance walked to the window and looked out over the tarmac. Planes were taxiing, people were boarding, life was continuing. But for 2 officers, everything had just stopped. The body cam footage was worse than anyone expected. In the small conference room where Vance, the AFOSI agents, the JAG attorney, and Chief Daniels sat, the video played on a large monitor. Culver's camera showed the initial approach, Thorne's calm compliance, the demand to see ID, the dismissal of the CAC and travel orders. Then Decker's camera showed the moment Thorne was forced to the ground, the sound of his face hitting the tile, the gasp from the crowd, Thorne's voice, steady and clear, I am not resisting. And then, at timestamp 07:51:33, Decker's whisper, sure you are, buddy. Another one trying to play dress-up. The JAG attorney paused the video. That statement alone is evidence of bias, but combined with the dismissal of valid federal ID, the use of force against a compliant subject, and the pattern of complaints in Officer Culver's file, he looked at Daniels. Chief, this is indefensible. Daniels said nothing. His face was gray. They watched passenger footage next, 3 different cell phone videos, all uploaded to social media within 30 minutes of the incident. The teenager's video had already been viewed 400,000 times. The comments were brutal. This is what happens when you wear the uniform while black. Disgusting, fire them both. He's a lieutenant colonel, and they treated him like a criminal. One of the AFOSI agents leaned back in his chair. General, we've also pulled Lieutenant Colonel Thorne's service record. He has an active top-secret SCI clearance. He's been briefed into multiple special access programs. The fact that he was detained without verification, this could have national security implications. Vance nodded, I'm aware. Daniels cleared his throat. General, I want you to know that this department does not condone. Chief, Vance said quietly, your officers assaulted one of my people. They ignored federal identification. They used excessive force. And they did it on camera. What you condone is irrelevant. What matters now is accountability. Daniels swallowed. What are you asking for? I'm not asking for anything, Vance said. I'm informing you that the Department of Justice has been notified. The FAA has been notified. And the Air Force will be filing a formal complaint with your oversight board. As for what I expect, she stood, I expect those 2 officers to be terminated immediately. By 2:00 p.m., officers Brett Culver and Ryan Decker were escorted out of the building. Their badges were confiscated. Their service weapons were turned in. Their certifications were flagged for permanent revocation. Culver's union representative tried to argue due process. He was informed that the body cam evidence was irrefutable and that any attempt to contest the termination would be met with full federal prosecution for civil rights violations. By 4:00 p.m., the lawsuit was filed, $18.3 million in damages, civil rights violations, assault, defamation, emotional distress, unlawful detention. The filing included sworn affidavits from witnesses, medical records showing Thorne's facial contusion and wrist abrasions, and a detailed breakdown of every second of the encounter. The FAA launched an immediate review of airport security protocols. The TSA opened an investigation into screening bias, and the Department of Justice sent a formal letter to the DFW Airport Police Department indicating that a consent decree was likely. Chief Daniels resigned 3 weeks later. 4 days after the incident, Lieutenant Colonel Desmond Thorne stood in a hearing room on Capitol Hill. His face still showed a faint bruise along his cheekbone, but his uniform was crisp. His voice was steady. He delivered his testimony on UCAV protocols exactly as planned, but when the committee chair asked if he had any closing remarks, Thorne paused. "Senator," he said, "I'd like to address what happened at DFW Airport." The room went silent. "I have served this country for 17 years, Thorne continued. "I have flown missions in hostile airspace, I have led men and women in combat, and I have done so with pride. But 4 days ago, I was treated like a criminal in my own country, not because I broke a law, but because 2 officers looked at my skin and decided I didn't belong in this uniform." He paused. "That should never happen to anyone, service member or civilian, and I hope that what happened to me will lead to real change, not just policy change, cultural change." The hearing room erupted in applause. The video of his testimony was viewed 12 million times in 48 hours. 6 months later, Thorne returned to flight status. He flew missions, he trained pilots, he continued his career. But late at night, when he was alone, he could still feel the cold tile against his cheek. He could still hear Decker's voice, another one trying to play dress-up. And he knew that no lawsuit, no testimony, no policy change could erase that moment. But he also knew that he had survived it. And that maybe, just maybe, his voice had made sure the next officer in uniform wouldn't have to. But deep in a locked file cabinet in a federal building in Washington, D.C., there was another folder, a thicker one, with more names, more incidents, more officers, and someone somewhere was just beginning to connect the dots.